Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining me at Matt's Indie Book Club. Uh, it's been a couple weeks since the last video, but I have a special one for you today. We have, I know it's going to be hard to remember, but we have Matthew Sidak. Okay, another Matthew. I know I'm making it confusing, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. Before we jump into today's interview, I just want to take a quick second for a few housekeeping things. If you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. It helps us bolster the numbers and push us into the algorithm just a little bit more and allows me to continue making these wonderful interviews and helping other authors on their journey. And if you have any questions for myself or Matthew, please feel free to drop them in the comments below and we will answer them when we see them. So without further ado, Matthew, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic today. How are you doing?
I'm glad the workday's almost over.
Indeed. Indeed.
um, for those who may not follow you on social media, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Certainly. My name is Matthew Sidak. I have been writing one fashion or another for close to 30 years now. And I started taking it serious and working on publishing about 13 years ago. I think my first short story publication was back in 2012. And that kind of lit a fire in me. It was something I can do this. And it was just with a small indie press, but it's something they liked my work. There were a couple snafus with that first publication, but it kind of lit that fire in me, and I took my writing that was just for fun, and I started doing it for real. And to working through it, my wife always yelling at me, more flavor crystals, and constantly seeking to improve myself. And I got the point. I released a book last summer, and I got another one coming out this summer.
Yeah, I think what you said right there too is always working to improve.
Yep,
That's the name of the game for us,
it is.
honestly. If we're not as authors, if we're not striving to make some change or to learn something along the way, this isn't this
Right.
isn't for you.
Right. And
It's just bluntly to put
it's
it.
always growing, always evolving, always learning. There's always
Yep.
something to learn.
Yep.
And
Because
that's not just for writing either. It's for everything, but
it's
especially
every
in
day.
writing.
Yeah, everyday life, honestly. Like there's always something to pick up, to interest, to learn. Um, your book that you released last June, The Dark Side of Super, is an urban fantasy, correct?
That is correct.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So it's a dark, gritty, realistic collection of short stories that all weave together to form a much larger picture. They 11 chapters in all. Each one features a different point of view character, and their story. And their stories revolve around them being normal people having superpowers. And in this instance, these superpowers come with a cost, whether that's mental, physical, emotional, otherwise. Kind of can vary depending on who you're talking about or what power that they have. It kind of started as a 2023 was a rough year for me, and one of my friends, I was in the nitty gritty of editing a different novel, and I had no creative outlet. And a friend of mine, bless her heart, she's one of my best friends, and this book would not exist without her, gave me a writing prompt. Write me a story about somebody who has a power that doesn't want it. Okay. And that
Okay.
kind of kicked off a fire in me. I'm like, I can imagine that. I can imagine having a superpower or something, and it's more harmful than it is good. So that gave us the first story of Felix in the book. I'm not going to go into details because
Gotta read it.
it's an eye opener. You need to read that story with a blank slate. The next story came about with one of my writing groups. We were doing a writing jam, and they gave us a writing prompt to give us a story of somebody who's on stage in the limelight. So that gave me my next character of Jasper, and he's a stage magician, and he actually can teleport, whether it's himself or other things. And I played with that a little bit, and I realized I could probably together a self anthology of this stuff. Take some loosely connected stories. So I sat down, and one of the things I learned from my editor on my other novel was I need to plan better, right? I can't just pants the thing. I can, but there's more work on the back end. So I figured, you know what? Let's take what she's taught me and put it to use. And I did that, and I plotted out 10 superpowers. And I'm like, okay, let's make up characters. Let's go through this. And I did that. And by the time I got to story 5 or 6, I realized these aren't just people in the same world. These aren't just people in the same city. These are people that actively know each other. And something's going on. I didn't know what at the time, but something is dragging them together. And by the time I got to story 7 or 8, I realized, okay, they're all being called something. And I started spitballing in the back of my head who and what that is. Now, I'm not going to go into details on that because that is something you truly need to go in unaware of. But that is the 11th story that ties all of the previous ones together, and it reveals the dark side of Super.
You know, to be honest, that kind of reminds me. You might or might not know this show, the TV show called Heroes.
Yes, I
Back
love
in the day.
Heroes. Yes,
That's what your story kind of reminds me of. To be honest, like some of them knew about each other, and some of
right,
them didn't. But then this giant crisis came,
right.
and everybody was revealed.
It's not dissimilar to that. I will say that. So, and yeah, Heroes, I loved it. The first season was just amazing. The latter seasons, for whatever reason, they kind of tapered off a bit, but the first season was absolutely amazing.
Right. That one's by far my favorite.
Yeah.
Here's a curveball for you. If you
Certainly.
could have any superpower, anything, what would it be? But the catch, because there's a catch.
Always a catch.
The catch is every time you use that power, you lose 30 minutes on your life.
Oh boy. So, without the catch, my answer would have been time travel, controlling, stopping, rewinding, forwarding time. And now that really, those two don't go hand in hand because
No.
they don't go hand in hand at all. So I would probably pick something like teleportation. So that is something that has always intrigued me back to the early days of watching Nightcrawler on the X-Men TV, X-Men cartoon in the mornings.
Yep.
And just the idea of opening a portal to somewhere else, a la the Portal video game, stuff like that. The physics of teleportation has always intrigued me. So probably that, what's 30 minutes of my life if I need to get the hell out of Dodge real quick?
Truly, though, I mean, honestly, it's like it comes every power would come with a cost, but like, are you willing to live with that cost if you know you're only going to use it when you absolutely
Right.
100% have to? Because if it's something that's like not super protruding into your lifestyle, then it would be no trouble not to
Right.
use it.
And then
unless-
there's always the other aspect too, is what if I don't have a choice about using it?
Exactly.
And I do dive into that a little bit with my story too. But yeah, that's the concept of power, right? It never comes for free.
There's a give and a take. Always.
Yep, always.
Always a give and a take. You've also been featured in some other anthologies. We were actually in the same one. Were those all short stories, or did you do any poetry, or what were you working with?
It's been almost exclusively short stories. Like I said, there was a couple that I mentioned from over a decade ago. Those were short stories that revolved around a currently shelved urban fantasy / fae concept.
Okay.
I want to go back to that one day, but it was a basically a fae meeting up with the real world sort of urban fantasy story, and
Okay.
that kind of got my. So backing up a little bit, when I say I've always been writing, I've been writing for a long time, and most of my writing has been done hand in hand with my wife. We co-write together. So those first couple of short stories were worlds that we built together, characters we built together that I did some world building with. I'm like, let's take this idea and let me expand upon it because I want to novelize this eventually. And I did that. The more recent ones were things that I ventured out and did mostly by myself. In the Heroes Anthology from Lost Boys, that was a collection of stories about heroes out of legend and lore, but every story takes the genre of their hero and twists it into something else. So for that one, I did Pandora's Box as an urban fantasy. If you can sense a theme here, I like urban fantasy. There was another one where you had Mulan in a mech suit. So it was an awesome take on heroes with their stories being told in a different way. Another one was from Quill and Crow Publishing House, which was Brackish Harbor. the interesting theme of that one is it's all eldritch and cosmic horror. We were all given the same idea. You have this town, fishing town. It's on its last legs. Pick a time frame and write a story about it.
Right.
So think very H.P. Lovecraft inspired, but our own thing. And
Okay.
I had a story with that. My wife actually gave me the inciting idea was it always begins with a sound. And I took that and ran with it and had a lot of fun with it. And so those are more recent ones. And like you said, with the Western Emporium anthology we were in, it's a story that I used to spitball a little bit of the past of the novel I'm currently working on releasing later this summer to build some of the ideas of what the world looked like before the many inciting events that leads to the novel I'm working on.
Right.
So I had fun with that.
Yeah, that's I've really that was my first anthology publication. I had a fun time kind of doing that because for me, publishing was still like at least being a published author was still very new.
Right.
I just put out my first, most call it a novella because the ebook is 89 pages and print it's like 92.
Right.
But so I found the process interesting. I really loved that.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to kind of get some recognition under your belt and kind of build up your confidence.
Exactly.
While
And
you
it's
go. Go ahead.
it's also a chance to learn because you pair with an editor. They're going to help you realize what you might need help with on a one-to-one basis. And to me, I always take that as a chance to learn, like we said, to learn and to better ourselves.
Yep, exactly. Speaking of your upcoming book, it's called The Backwards Night, correct?
That is correct.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and when the tentative release date is for that?
So currently, the tentative release date is August 1st. That may shift depending. A storm rolled through our area back on March 14th, put a lovely tree through our roof. So we're dealing with that. And it's just been. I'm still actually working from the house because my office is on the side of the house that wasn't damaged, but we're currently living in a rental and all that. So my wife did the cover art. She's doing the cover design and trying to do that around trying to finalize the book artifacts around our life being basically an upheaval has been just slow going. So tentative August 1st. This is a novel that I've been working on for almost a decade.
Wow.
2016, my wife and I decided, you know what? Let's tell a story about a world where magic has gone away. Let's tell a story about two people that are both working to hunt mages for different reasons that end up butting heads. And she helped me with the early draft. And once we realized we had something that I could take, flesh a world out from scratch, I ran with it. So 2016, we wrote it. We kind of what I'll call a very verbose outline. It was very long. I took that over the next couple of years and I turned it into two novels: The Backwards Night, The Forgotten Princess. They weren't good. I will admit that up front. They weren't good. But I call them my manure drafts. They're the shit from which something might grow. Pardon my language. And something did grow. And I hired an editor, and Ashley Hutchinson. She has done a great job back in 2021. And just for various reasons, it's been a little slow going, mostly on my side. But it's my tribute to a lot of the fantasy novels or other media that I consumed growing up. There's a lot of inspiration from Raymond E. Feist, Wheel of Time, even Dark Tower and Gunslinger from Stephen King. It's my love letter to my wife too. She helped me write it. I made her a promise back in 2016. Come hell or high water, I will see this published. And here we are. Almost 10 years later, it's going to be done.
Hey, as long as it gets done, right?
Right.
I think going along with what you said, though, as far as like shit manuscripts, like we all have those. I think, the important thing is that we keep those.
Yes.
Because one thing that I've learned is that you should never ever throw out an idea.
Never delete. You can cut, but you cut and move to the side.
Exactly, because I have probably 12 open things at this point, whether they've just half outlined or some have 500 words
Right.
or whatever the case may be. But I just was just like, a friend told me, he's like, hey, look, you may not be in love with them right now. You may not have any want to finish them right now, but don't throw them out. He's like, you never know when you're going to have the want to finish it. Which actually, funny enough, this second book that I have coming out, I don't have a release date yet because it just went with the editor for first rounds, but that was literally a short book that I was going to co-write with somebody that sat for 6 years with about 100 words on it. And the person never got the time, and I saw it one day cleaning out Google Drive, and I was like, let me take a look at this, and maybe I can do something with it. And here we are. It's 56,000 words later.
There you go.
We're doing it.
And like, I just turned in another short story for another anthology call, and it took me 4 drafts. The first draft, I wrote it, and it was painful. I mean, I swear to God, I bled and I cried for those words. But it let me realize, okay, I have something. I have an idea. 90% of it's trash, but there's 10% in there that's good. So I rewrote it. I'm like, okay, that's closer. I'm about 50% done. Did a third draft. I'm like, all right, I'm about 90% there. And I farmed it out to some of my friends that we read each other's stories, and that got me, okay, here's what I need to touch up. And I did that. And that fourth draft came in pretty smoking hot, if I may say so. But yeah, I never cut it. I will cut. I will never delete. I have about 30,000 words from one of the middle drafts of the Backwards Night that I cut, painfully so, but I'm going to keep to the side, because the goal is, as I get that stuff that's a story in its own right, while it didn't add anything to the Backwards Night, I'm going to do a side story anthology at some point. Right. So here's some behind the scenes things that happened. You just didn't get to see it when they happened. So
yeah, and I think that's one of the pieces of advice that I got was, no matter what you come up with, always just write it down.
Yep.
Just, it doesn't matter if you have the full story in mind. It doesn't matter if you have a full outline done yet. You can edit later.
Right.
That's what editing's for. To polish
exactly.
And change. And one of the big things that I learned that seems kind of obvious to most other writers is beta readers.
Yes.
My first book, I'll be honest, I hadn't read it in 6 years before I decided to put it somewhere. And then that publisher closed, and I got the new one. And when I went to give it to him, I looked at it and I said, do you mind if I have this back for just a little bit? And that's when it hit me. It's like, man, you could have, if you took the time to reread your own work at least once or twice, and then maybe gotten some other opinions on it, you might have been a little bit more happy with it, and it might have gotten a little bit longer.
And that is a key point. And I actually just did a book signing at a local bookstore. They had a group of indie authors there, kind of during a huge art festival. And I had a guy stop by, and he's like, man, I really need help. I'm like, well, tell me what you have. And the biggest thing that he said to me is he's doing it alone. I'm like, no, stop right there.
Yeah.
That's your first mistake. As a writer, you cannot go about this alone. You will get caught up in your own head. You will get lost in the quagmire of your own thoughts. You need other people to write with, share stories with, learn from, and we are stronger together. Exactly. That's a saying from one of my writing friends. We are constantly talking and helping each other, whether it's just brainstorming or anything. We are, as writers, we are stronger together.
Exactly. And I think too, that's one thing a lot of people forget. It's like, we need that and it doesn't have to be, I'm talking, a bunch of random strangers.
Right.
Like, throughout your time marketing and being on social media, you'll find a few people that you can connect with and click with, that you can be like, hey, if I shoot you an email, would you read this for me and just give me some honest feedback?
Right.
9 out of 10, they're going to say yes, because as indie authors, it's all of us. Like,
Right.
it's the only way this works.
Right.
Yes, we all want to sell our books individually, but at the same time,
We're in it
we're
together.
we're
Right.
all in the shitstorm of marketing and trying to navigate whatever platform it is. Um, Speaking of platforms, what platform do you find most helpful for connecting with other people for writing and marketing?
For writing, I'm in a couple different writing discords, writing specific, where I have a couple different people or a couple different groups of people that I can share my stories with or provide feedback when they need help with stuff. Um, that's the biggest thing. So private discords, writing groups, that even in real life writing groups. I mean, that's like we just said, that's tantamount to success. Outside of that, I've had a lot of success on Blue Sky. It's been a very easy to use social media without having to fight or feed the algorithm. Um, it's kind of like the wild wild west, but in a good way. TikTok has been a little bit of fun. Instagram, Threads. I've had some sales from Blue Sky that I know of. You know, I was like, somebody's like, "Hey, I need a book rec." I'm like, "Well, based on what you're saying, you might like this, and here you go." And they bought a book. So
Right. Yeah, because that's what when I started noticing when I first got on Threads was a lot of people are always looking for book recommendations. There's a lot of readers, writers, and people who just want to help promote other people.
right,
Which led me to actually making an Amazon list. So I have a free Amazon list on my Linktree of anybody who wanted to add their book, any indie author. There's probably pushing close to 60 to 100 books on there. I'm just like, hey, I've got this list. Would you like to add your book? And it just lives permanently on my Linktree. So I'm like, it's got all genres. It's got romance. It's got fantasy. It's got everything. I don't. I may not read it, but I don't discriminate about it.
right,
We've all got to make the sale.
right.
Um, Outside of writing, what are a few of your hobbies?
It might be easier to tell you what aren't my hobbies. As we said earlier, you have to learn, constantly have to learn. So I'm constantly picking up new things to try. So one of the biggest things I love to do is to tinker. Whether that is learning how to make somewhat homemade custom soap, even food. Picked up sourdough and making homemade jam. I got into 3D printing. So it's something, if it can let me keep myself busy with learning and actively engaging with stuff, I love to do it. I love to read. I love to, like I said, there's my writing that I do for this with novels. I still write almost every night on the side with my wife that we might novelize that stuff someday too. Um, Video games, tabletop games, Pathfinder Second Edition is my current go-to jam. Whatever can keep me busy and keep me from goblin brain from taking over.
Right. I think it's that you're kind of like me in that aspect. It's like they may be hobbies to some people, but not to all. But to us, it's like, what can I do to keep my brain active?
Right.
Because I've had times where I'm sitting here because I love to play Stardew Valley.
Right.
Stardew Valley is my jam. I've had 3 different farms, beat all of them, but it's one of those games that you can just sit there and you don't really have to super think, like strategy think, but you creatively think
Right.
because you're like, oh, where would I put this? How would I do this? I gotta go mine this, and I'll tell you what, I've resolved some writing issues by sitting there and just vegging out and playing that for 3
Yep.
hours.
Yeah. It's amazing when you can get something to occupy your brain enough that
Mhm.
the hamster wheel can turn and you can solve a problem without realizing it.
Right. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the kitty cat that's in your picture that we
So
have.
that is actually not my cat. That is a
Oh,
friend's cat. And whenever I get to see him, he jumps up on my shoulder. Uh, so yeah, it's one of the things. I love that picture, just the way I managed to capture him sitting on me. But we used to play Starfinder, and he would hop up on my shoulders while I was DMing, and he'd be grooming my hair and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a friend's cat, but I love that picture, and I just had to use it.
well, that's to me that I had to ask about it because I'm like, whether it's yours or not, that picture is definitely a conversation
Right?
starter.
isn't it?
Because I've had cats a lot growing up and in my life,
Right.
and good luck getting them to sit still.
Right.
So the fact that you captured it that perfectly,
I was amazed that it came out like that.
um, I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but when you're writing, are you someone who needs it completely quiet, or do you like to have a movie or a show playing in the background? What's your jam?
100% music. It used to just be I have a generic writing playlist that has, God, I think like 78 hours worth of music on it, and that became unwieldy. So I started curating mood, not I'll say mood music, but it's more atmosphere inducing. So I have my Backwards Night playlist that starts off as all fantasy, upbeat and upgoing, but as it progresses, it follows the tone of the book and it gets a little bit darker and a little bit darker, which feeds into the playlist for the Forgotten Princess, which is all really dark, heavy, anxiety-inducing music because that fits the tone of the book. Dark
Right,
Side of Super was some of my favorite not club songs, but stuff that you might hear in the city where these characters are. So
right.
modern day music.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. People ask me that, and I'm like, no matter what I'm doing in life, I have to have music on.
Yep.
I've got probably 30 playlists on my Spotify, and I most of the time it's just go straight to the liked playlist
Yep.
and hit shuffle because people are like, won't you sing along and mess up your writing? I'm like, look, I've grown up in a world of multitasking. Like,
Right.
this is every job I've had. Somebody's got their phone hooked up and they're blaring something.
Oof.
So really, it's to me, it's noise, but it's the creative noise
Right.
because that's the reason I use the liked playlist because it's all the jams that you love and that get you thinking and moving in some way or another,
Right.
and elicit some sort of emotion.
And I've taken to doing the day jams on Spotify, and I'll listen to those if I can while I'm doing the day job. And I'm like, oh, this song might fit that playlist, so I'll add it to it and just
Yep.
build them that way too.
I do the same exact thing because for those who don't use Spotify, like if you have a playlist and you scroll to the very bottom of the page, it will suggest you music that is either from artists that are in that playlist or very, very similar. And that is how I find 90% of my
Yep.
music. And then when I get bored or whoop, we got disconnected. One second, guys. Let me see what we got here.
Sorry about that.
There
Not
we go. Eh, technical things happen. I
indeed.
mean, it's inevitable. Um, but no, yeah, like it'll give you that suggestion, and then half the time you add it to your likes, and then when you're bored down the road, you go back into that, click on that particular artist, and then you just start going through their
Yep.
catalog, and that's how you find the music. Um, you know, one last very important question for you before we end off. Do you have any interviews or signings or things that you would like to promote before we end off?
So first and foremost, as we've mentioned a couple times, the Backwards Night, my next novel, first entry in my Eldritch Fantasy series, as I call it, is coming tentatively August 1st. So I'm going to have pre-orders available for that really soon. I'm hoping to have all of that ready to go mid-June to July 1st. So go to my website, backwardsnight.com. I got a mailing list there. That is the best way to keep track of that because I will also be doing later this year, I think it's in November, a group of friends are doing what's called a Booktopia on Backer Kit. So all of us, and I don't know how many there are, we're all going to be setting up our own crowdfunding projects. And I'm aiming to do a audiobook for the Dark Side of Super. And what the goal is we're all building off of each other's hype. So it's going to be a lot of different projects, a couple audiobooks, a couple book books that basically I would love. I even have a narrator picked out and everything for the Dark Side of Super. So
Nice.
that too, sign up on my mailing list, find my socials, follow me. I will scream unto the void so you all are aware of it.
And guys, I will have the links to buy the Dark Side of Super and his link tree in the description, as well as my own links, so you can go check out his books, see what he's up to on socials, and see if you can get connected into the community and find some like-minded people to talk to. Matthew, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it, and
Not a
have a great rest
problem.
of your day.
You do the same, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.